Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Cormorant Productions, here to talk about This Is Us, Season 5, Episode 9, The Ride. This episode was directed by John Hurtis, who plays Miguel in this series, which is one of the reasons why I'm bringing it up when usually I don't. This is not his first directing gig. He had 3 others, which appear to be short films. In addition to that, he has a few writing credits, as well as 16 producer credits. Seems like he did a decent job. For the most part, it seems like standard fare, but there were 2 moments that do stand out to me, and I will of course talk about that later in the video. We open up in the future timeline, though we don't know this initially, and we see an adult Deja, played by Latrice Harper, and my god, is the casting here uncanny. She absolutely looks like what an older Deja would look like, and she has her mannerisms down in an uncanny fashion, right up there with Hannah Zeal having Chrissy Metz's mannerisms down. I'm sure I've said this plenty of times before, but this show does an exceptional job with casting. Future Deja is a doctor now, and she is beginning a labor rotation, which she seems completely uninterested in doing. She tells her friend that she has to go, and asks her to cover for her. We cut to Jack and Rebecca when the babies were first born, still in the hospital, and they missed a trick here. They had an opportunity to bring back Dr. K, and this would have been a perfect time for a cameo. But no sight of Gerald McCraney in this one. While changing the baby's diapers, Kevin starts peeing all over the place. And you know what? That totally seems like a Kevin thing to do. A nurse enters the scene, and she suggests that she thinks they are definitely ready to go. Jack lets off a nervous laugh, which indicates to me that he's not so certain. The nurse, wink wink, says that there's a cabinet full of goodies, things like diapers and baby powder, and she's not saying that they should take some, but she's not going to tell on them if she does, if they do. Wink wink. Rebecca seems nervous about leaving as well, and Jack says, "Hey, we can do this." And I'm not entirely sure who he's trying to convince, himself or her, or both. Jack says that he's going to go down to the car and install the car seat. And Rebecca says, "Do you have the manual?" And Jack's all like, "I'm a guy. We don't need no stinking manuals," as my dad and family would used to say. And that's true. A lot of the times, us men, we do not use manuals. Cut to Jack trying to install the car seats. And his false bravado turns out to be exactly that. False bravado. He's struggling to put the seats in, and he's talking to himself, saying that he can do this, much in the way that I would do when I'm trying to boost my confidence. We're getting a little early indication here that Jack's nervousness goes beyond simple nervousness and into anxiety. A cop wanders by and asks him if he could use some help. Jack says he's good, and the cop says that he thinks he's got him in backwards. Jack attempts to make an excuse, and it doesn't sound very convincing to me. In fact, it doesn't even sound like a fully formed thought. The cop barely acknowledges him and asks, "How come you have 3 car seats?" And Jack seems surprised by the question, and he answers, 3 babies. And the cop says, "God help you." This doesn't do anything for Jack's growing anxiety. And I'm not sure that I recall Jack ever being this way. I do remember in the episode Kyle, Season 1, Episode 3, that Jack was basically raw nerves throughout that entire episode. But I don't remember ever seeing any indication that Jack has anxiety problems. though it would certainly make sense, and we will get into that in a little bit. Cut to present day, where Kevin is also trying to install a car seat, and he says to himself that his fingers are too strong or something, and he starts watching a YouTube video about how to install a car seat, which I'm not going to lie, that moment amused the heck out of me. While doing so, Kevin notices that a fan is taking pictures of him, and he gets really angry and aggressive towards this fan, which, wow. I mean, at this point, I was thinking that I had never seen Kevin react that way to a fan in the entire course of the series. And I've seen some fans be pretty damn annoying towards him. But then it occurred to me that the day Madison went into labor, it had to be at least morning time when he was preparing to go on set. He left the movie studio. It ended up being nighttime that he was driving. Who knows how long he was actually driving for. But eventually he got a flight which was 2 hours from his present location, which he just barely made. He then had a 9-hour flight, during which I'm sure he didn't get any sleep. And he showed up just in time for Madison's labor to start. And who knows how long that took. And I'm sure he's been in the hospital for at least a couple of days at this point, during which I'm also sure he's had little to no sleep at all. If anyone deserves to be testy in this episode, it definitely is Kevin. Eventually, Kevin realizes how over the top he's being, and allows the fan to take a better picture. Kevin returns to the hospital room where Madison is holding one of their babies, with some coffee, and I guess a latte or something for Madison, a decaffeinated one because she's not quite able to have caffeine yet. And Madison asks, "Hey, guess what?" The nurse says, "Guess who has 2 thumbs and can go home today?" I'm gonna go ahead and guess that the answer is Madison. She seems psyched by that. Madison asks Kevin if he's excited, and he says, "Oh yeah, of course. It's just that we've had a lot of help here, and it's just going to be the 2 of us." And Madison points out, just the 4 of us, actually. Cut to Randall and Beth in the past timeline when Annie was born. We don't see Randall in the present day. We only see him in the past and in the future scenes. I wouldn't have minded at least a cameo in the present day, at least to see that Randall got home. He spent the last 3 episodes trying to get home from New Orleans. We see him in the future, so I guess we can suppose from that he got home safely. Cut to Toby, who is sitting on the bench talking to somebody. We have no clue who. Some were speculating that this was some kind of affair that he was having, but I think who he was talking to is not fully spelled out, but we get the general idea of what was being talked about at the time. Kate leaves the hospital with the newborn in hand, and Toby lifts a sign saying, "Hi, Haley, I'm your dad." And he asks, "Do you think she can read that?" And Kate's all like, "Aw," and no, Toby, she can't read that. And Toby gets to hold her for the first time. Toby asks where Ellie is, and Kate says that she is signing the birth certificate. Kate suggests that they need to be extra sensitive to her today, that it's going to be difficult for her. Okay, so in this episode, it is made clear that this was an open adoption and that their intentions was for Ellie to stay in the baby's life. Did we know that before? Because that's news to me. I don't recall that ever coming up in the previous episodes of this season. My friend Adam seems to think that it had come up, but I literally don't remember. I suppose that I could go back and watch the other episodes this season, but if anybody who is watching this video has any particular insight into that, I would gladly like to hear from you. Ellie is wheeled out of the hospital in a wheelchair. She joins Kate and Toby and says that she left a surprise in the birth certificate in that Haley is now named after Haley's Comet. Totally sharing Toby's sense of humor. And apparently, they are taking Ellie home, which confused some fans, curious as to why that is the case. But it's never actually talked about how Ellie even got to the hospital in the first place. Presumably, Kate drove her here. And then we see a montage of the various parents in the various timelines buckling their kids in and then preparing to take off for home. And credits. 9 minutes and 19 seconds into this episode. We cut to Jack and Rebecca in the past timeline. Jack, after a beat, says, "Have I mentioned how much of a freaking warrior you are?" And given his behavior during the course of this episode, I really don't think he's one to talk. Anyway, the ride between the two of them seems pretty awkward. Rebecca says, while trying to look in the back seat, that she wished she could see them. If there weren't 3 babies in the car, she would be sitting in the back with them. As she turns, she feels pain, and Jack asks if she's alright. And apparently her stitches are bothering her. Rebecca continues to be a worrywart, and Jack assures her that everything is fine. And then the babies start crying, which only jangles their nerves further. And we can very clearly see that Jack is not okay. We cut a little further in the timeline with Randall and Beth. Beth is in the back seat with the new baby Annie. After some back and forth, Randall brings up the possibility of having a third baby. Randall will spend the rest of this episode kind of being a little bit of a jackass, acting like Beth said that they would never have another kid, when that's really not what she said at all. What she said is she doesn't want to talk about it right now because her insides are on the outsides. And I gotta say, Randall, there's a time and a place. This isn't it. I feel for how you feel, but once again, this is the wrong time to bring this up. Cut to Madison and Kevin. Madison is taking baby pictures in the car and saying that the babies are so cute she wishes she could eat their face, but not in a bad way. Okay, Madison. Kevin looks like he is struggling to stay awake, and Madison suggests that she could take over driving. But Kevin is basically like, nah, you just had 2 kids. And then he says that he sees something. Madison takes this to mean that Kevin is hallucinating. But no, Kevin sees someone following them, and it turns out to be paparazzi. Kevin stops the car and then gets out to confront the paparazzi, with Madison yelling after him. We cut to Toby and Kate and Ellie in the car. Kate is going on, and it's clear to me that something's bothering Ellie. Kate goes on to be kind of overbearing in this scene, though not as bad as I originally thought upon watching this episode the first time. The reason I felt that way is because this is one moment that John Hurtis does a really good job of kind of putting us in Ellie's shoes, kind of feeling overwhelmed, and Kate's just going on, completely oblivious to the fact that something is bothering Ellie. Toby picks up on it before Kate does. She keeps going on until Ellie is basically like, Kate, I can't do this. I know we said yes to an open adoption, but I just can't do this. I can't have her in my life right now. And Kate suggests, well, we can talk about this. And then Ellie is basically like, I don't want to talk about this. And then Kate keeps pushing. And yes, I think she is way too pushy here. She should back off. Something that Toby seems to be trying to get her to do. Ellie says that she really just wants to say goodbye to Haley and then go home. and Kate seems stunned and hurt, finally stopping, and Toby just says quietly, "It's okay. It's okay." In my view, Toby had the right idea of how to handle that. Kate, not as much. But again, it's not as bad as it played the first time I watched this episode. Cut to Jack and Rebecca in the past, and the babies are crying. And oh man, ever since Julia, my daughter, was born, I have a visceral reaction to hearing babies cry. Like, I didn't have this problem before, but I literally cannot listen to babies cry on TV. It bothers me a lot. Meanwhile, Jack has a very impatient driver behind him, acting like a total jackass. He eventually speeds next to Jack, cuts him off, and then goes into the gas station with sparks flying. Wow. In response to this, Jack gets out of the car, ready to confront this man, banging on the guy's hood, yelling at him. Meanwhile, Rebecca yells at him and basically scolds him like she is one of his kids. Her kids, rather. And Jack finally cools it. Now, this isn't entirely out of character for Jack, because we've certainly seen him be a hothead plenty of times during the series. And man, that guy definitely deserved it. Cut to Kevin and Madison. I jumped the gun a little bit here, in that Kevin had not yet confronted the paparazzi guy. But here he does so. He comes out guns blazing, yelling at the guy who's still taking pictures and acting like a scumbag. Madison eventually comes over to them, tells Kevin that he will deal with it, and basically tells the photographer that if he goes away, gives him their little family moment, she will call him and tell the paparazzi guy when Kevin goes jogging. The paparazzi guy is, will he be wearing shorts that will show off his package? And Madison is like, gross. Takes the card from the paparazzi guy, and then they take off. She tells Kevin that he needs to take a rest, that his Liam Neeson impression is not him at his best, and she needs him at his best. Madison is probably without question, the most level-headed person in this episode. Motherhood very clearly agrees with her. Cut to Randall and Beth, who have arrived at Dairy Queen. They're back and forth, pleasant bantry, until Randall, who was going to go inside and get the ice cream, by the way, puts Annie down and looks at the baby. Beth asks, "What?" And Randall can't help himself. He has to bring up the whole idea of having a third kid again. He says, "Can I just say one thing before we close the book on having another kid?" Dang it, Randall. She never closed the book on having another kid. She just said she doesn't want to talk about it now. You already failed at the whole time and place thing, and now you're failing at letting something go, which, granted, is Randall's character. Eventually, Beth gets irritated enough that she goes into Dairy Queen to get the ice cream herself. We cut to the future scenes where Deja is about to get in the car with Annie, and here it is revealed that Deja is pregnant. And officially, all 3 of Randall's kids are accounted for. There were some fan theories out there that we hadn't seen Annie yet because she was dead. The same way that people assume that Miguel and Toby and Kate, well, actually we've seen Toby, but that Kate and Miguel are also dead. For me, I think it's certainly possible that Kate's dead, and I think it's highly likely that Miguel is no longer with us at this point in the series. I also see a high probability that the creators are simply screwing with us, like they have done plenty of times in the past, and that everybody is alive and well. Not Rebecca so much. Cut to Jack and Rebecca. Jack is pumping gas. Now, I had said that there was a great moment for John Hurtis, but actually I think the entire thread, he does a great job in capturing Jack's increasing anxiety. After pumping the gas, he goes into the convenience store and pays for some nuts and a bottle of whiskey, which he downs right there and then drops it in the trash. This is the moment from the trailer that heavily concerned me. My problem is this. We saw the first days of the kid's life represented in Kyle. I do not like the idea that Jack was drinking during that time. And that was my worry about this episode, bringing that into the story now. I have no problem with addressing Jack's alcoholism. I just thought it should be done elsewhere, not during this timeline. As it stands, they take care of my concern by making this basically just a one-off, which also kind of bothers me. I'm contradicting myself here in that I feel if you're going to do it, you might as well do it. But while we're here, let's take a moment to talk about Jack's alcoholism. Many alcoholics become that way for a variety of reasons. In some cases, it's genetic. If your father is an alcoholic, he can pass that down to you. At the same time, it could be a learned behavior, which is roughly the same concept, except that in this case, it's not about genetics. It's about passing down unhealthy behaviors to your children. In this case, his father's alcoholism. And I think we heard somewhere that Jack's dad's dad also was an alcoholic. Some people drink like this to self-treat for a mental illness that is not getting treated otherwise. Or perhaps they're covering the pain of a tragedy or a trauma that they experienced. In this case, Jack is overwhelmed by bringing his family home and becoming a father, and he's increasingly having anxiety about all these situations, and he takes a drink as a way to cope, which is not a good direction to go. He then proceeds to suggest that the mother of his children, who just gave birth, who is clearly in pain because of her stitches, that she drive. This episode is not a good showing for Jack in the slightest. We cut to Kate and Toby. The Ellie thing is very clearly weighing on Kate's mind. Toby is about to try to tell her that he's been laid off. But Kate cuts him off and asks him, how are you not more upset by what happened with Ellie? It changed really fast in a really sad way. And Toby says he's sorry that Ellie is hurting. But they knew that going into this thing, that things could change quickly. That yes, they had plans, but those plans might change. Kate reveals that the reason she wanted to have the open adoption in the first place is because of her brother Randall. She wants Haley to know exactly who her mother was. And that's great. There's nothing really stopping you from making sure that Haley knows who her mother is and telling that story. Ellie doesn't need to be involved for that to still happen. Which is essentially the point that Toby ends up making. And I gotta say that Toby and Madison are the true winners of this episode. They come off the best out of everybody that we see throughout. We cut to Randall with baby Annie apologizing for making her witness the dispute that he had with Beth. He tells her when someone mentioned that she had his eyes, that made him happy. He didn't know who his parents were. He will eventually, but as of now, he doesn't know where he came from. He made a family tree back in school, and he knew it wasn't quite right. So he was really happy to start something, to have his kids be his branches. And listen, Randall, I get all of that. I totally feel you. But still, bringing up a third child now, it's just the wrong time. And once again, Beth did not close the door on the possibility of a third child. Beth comes out to hear the rest of Randall's speech, just in time for him to say that eventually Tess and Annie will have grandchildren, and that will be a further extension of himself, his little branches, all with his eyes. Randall asks if the ice cream, the second ice cream, is a peace offering. Well, if you ask me, Randall, you're the one who should be making the peace offering. But whatever. Cut to Jack and Rebecca finally arriving home. The kids are finally asleep and no longer crying. They debate moving the kids into the house, but Rebecca says no, so they just decide to wait. Rebecca eventually ends up revealing that her mother once had a miscarriage, and that she was sad throughout her life, and wasn't necessarily a great mother because of that sadness. And Rebecca worries that because she lost Kyle, that she too would bring that sadness with her. And Jack assures her that that's just not going to be the case. Rebecca will be a great mother. Jack eventually tells her about what transpired at the gas station, that he had a drink, and that's why he had her drive. She listens with empathy, as Jack also expresses his desire to be nothing like his father, and Rebecca tells him that he will be a better father and a better man than his father ever was. Cut to Toby and Kate. Toby eventually tells Kate that the reason that Ellie chose them is because of Kate's kind-hearted nature, sense of humor, and unflappable nature. I'm not sure that's totally accurate, but I'll just give it to Toby that that's true. As far as sense of humor goes, I think that's because of your sense of humor. Toby believes that Ellie will eventually change her mind, but in the end, he thinks that Ellie chose them because Kate would handle things no matter what happened. And then Toby reveals the fact that he was laid off, which is what I assume he was talking about on the phone with whoever he was talking about with, rather. Kate takes this news better than you would expect, especially since that means neither one of these people have jobs at this point. We cut to Kevin waking up, but as it turns out, he's not waking up. He's in the middle of a dream. And Kevin sees his father with the big three as babies. The babies stop crying, and Kevin asks, "How did you get them to stop crying?" And Jack says, "Dumb luck." I should point out that this is one of the few times in the series that Jack gets to interact with his adult children. And I'm curious how we're supposed to take this. Is this Jack, the spirit of Jack, literally communicating to Kevin in his dreams? Or is this Kevin's subconscious talking to him? That would seem to indicate that Kevin knows what he needs to know here. Kevin specifically says he spent his entire life trying not to be his father. And Kevin has spent his trying to live up to him, which is a point that I made in the episode there during my video on that episode. So does this indicate that Kevin deep down actually has an understanding of that on a subconscious level? And this is basically his subconscious telling him that? Jack points out that they spent their entire lives being scared. Jack tells him to do him a favor. Stop trying to be like Jack. He tells him to close his eyes, figure out what he wants, and then go and get it. Kevin wakes up for real this time, and as it turns out, he's sleeping in the car. They are home. Madison took the babies inside. Kevin says that Madison should have woke him up. And Madison says, with a smile on her face, that she had it all under control. Kevin watches as Madison takes care of the babies. He closes his eyes, like his father told him to, and he makes a decision. He says, Madison, let's make this official. I know we've been engaged, but not engaged. Dancing around the weirdness of it all. I really want you to be my wife. I want to be a family. He tells her he will get her whatever ring she wants. And then he kneels before her and says, you deserve that. But for right now, and then he starts trying to take off his hospital bracelet. And man, I can tell you from experience, those things are a pain in the butt to get off. When he eventually gets it off, he offers it as a ring. And he asks, Madison, will you marry me? And Madison, of course, says yes. And then they kiss. After a montage which sees Jack and Rebecca's kids growing up, we cut to the future timeline, where Deja and Annie have arrived at Kevin's house. The one where the family is gathering around for Rebecca. Tess comes out and says, took you long enough, and Deja blames Annie. Which, of course, Annie mildly objects. The three of them make the decision to go inside. But Randall comes out to greet them and calls them his branches. Which at this point, Randall also has a real family tree, as he knows both his biological mother and his biological father. One of the girls asks him how he's holding up. Randall gets emotional and says he's okay. I'm better for seeing you three. Randall asks if Deja's okay, and Deja says she's fine. She just had a long day. And maybe she's a little pregnant. She doesn't say that part. They hear a white car beeping. And Randall says, hey, look who's here. And of course, we don't see who it is. So we get to have another little mystery. Who's in the white car? Randall asks Deja, how was the ride up? And Deja says, it was okay. It always comes faster than you would think. Randall smiles at her and kisses her on the cheek. And that is where our episode comes to an end. This Is Us is taking another break. Not quite clear on how long. Currently, Internet Movie Database says it's coming back on March 9th. But given what happened last time, I'm not sure that I can count on that. As for me and myself, I too am going to take a little break from this series. During the opening month of this year, I've gone at my content pretty hard, and I think I need to take a little bit of a break to avoid burning out. I'll still have some smaller videos so that I still have some stuff coming out. But next week I will not be doing a rewatch video. Maybe I'll do it the following week. At any rate, if you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join my Facebook group, Corman Productions. You can also join my This Is Us Corman Productions page, also on Facebook. You can buy something from the Corman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a coffee, which is a new way to support content creators such as myself. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Corman Productions, signing off.